What happens when creativity clashes with authority? Join me as I turn my holiday decorations into a spectacular rebellion that makes even the strictest neighbor confront the spirit of joy. Hey there, Porch Patrol Squad. Let me know if you've ever locked horns with a Karen like in today's story. Smash that like button and spill the tea in the comments. And if you're craving more outrageous HOA battles, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Believe me, you don't want to miss how this unfolds. As I sat there basking in the glow of my inflatable arsenal, I could feel each neighbor's gaze sharpen like a collective spear aimed at Karen's self-righteous nonsense. It was a beautiful sight, like witnessing a flock of seagulls suddenly dive bombing a French fry, chaotic and yet strangely satisfying. My heart raced in rhythm with the escalating chatter on the group chat. Team Inflatable, they dubbed it, as if we were on some epic quest, rather than showcasing decorations one might find at a carnival gone awry. Questions abounded. Would the HOA's president scowl upon our playful revolt? Would Karen retaliate? My palms grew sweaty as the moment drew closer. I glanced at Danny, who winked at me from across the living room, holding his own oversized inflatable flamingo, an absurd yet needed confidant for our next challenge. But as the Zoom meeting approached, I couldn't shake the burning curiosity about just how Karen would retaliate. In one desperate attempt to prepare for her verbal grenades, I rallied my creative juices and started practicing my elevator pitch with Danny. How about, your problem isn't with inflatable cheer, Karen. It's with your own lack of joy, I rehearsed, voice exaggerated to the point of comedy. Or maybe, your head's not the only thing that's blown up. Take a look outside. Laughter erupted as that thought tickled our imaginations. However, deep down, a spark of concern flickered, ignited by the unknown. This was no mere skirmish, after all. This was urban warfare over inflatable displays. The stakes were absurd yet somehow terrifying. Finally, we signed on to Zoom, where Karen showed up in her typical blazer, polished and ready to crush. But oh, how the tide had shifted. The screen filled with my neighbors, every face adorned with grins that stretched wider than my inflatable penguin, and rather than feeling the heat of intimidation, I found solace in their camaraderie. Just beneath my smirk was a bubbling excitement. Could this truly be the night we uncovered our newfound voices and simultaneously popped Karen's ballooning ego? When the HOA meeting began, with Karen giving a half-hearted rundown of her initial complaints regarding my decorations, I could barely stifle my laughter. Would her first act be to tell me to deflate my joy? As she prattled on, I mentally prepared to counter her every jab, and sure enough, my moment arrived. Let's be honest, I said, ready to cleanse the room of Karen's oppressive seriousness. Inflation and deflation can't even hold a candle to what she's wrought upon us. A gasp erupted in my virtual audience. Karen's eyes narrowed sinisterly, her bobbed hair framing her frown like a storm cloud. Yet, as my neighbors began to chuckle, something magical happened. I showed them my collection, holding up a sign reading, "Happy Holidays, Karen," next to a stuffed Christmas unicorn bouncing cheerfully. The screen echoed with chuckles, and as the absurdity of the situation became impossible to deny, suddenly, I found myself sharing a comedic dialogue with the HOA president, who, blessedly, was actually enjoying our shenanigans. When the audacity of our inflatable rebellion reached a legendary status, my neighborhood turned into a festival of laughter and unity. There I was, immersed in the dominance of joy. As the meeting ranged on, "So is it a matter of aesthetics, Karen, or something deeper?" I teased, tossing out the idea that possibly, just possibly, her issues with our inflatable cheer had more to do with her own inflated sense of authority. After all, who wouldn't want a parade of whimsical inflatables to bless their barren yard? Come on, Karen, open your heart, or at least your window. A buoyant surge of delight swept through the participants as they nodded knowingly. It was like each jesting remark cracked the wall of her tightly wound demeanor, like a balloon pricked with a tiny pin pop but somehow intact. From there, the rest of my neighbors chimed in, voices bubbling with laughter-filled camaraderie. "Yeah, Karen, how about some inflatable appreciation for all those fussy rules?" one neighbor shouted. shaking his inflatable flamingo in delight. Rather than milking our statements for negativity, we were basking in the joy of ridiculousness. The HOA meeting succumbed to uncontrollable laughter as Karen's icy countenance morphed from fervent authority to amused puzzlement. How could we present her with faux arguments with such frivolity? The irony was palpable. In my career as a homeowner, I had never felt so alive as when defending my right to be unequivocally silly. Caught in a wave of absurdity, I thought back on our neighborhood's transformation. Karen's puzzled expression became the stuff of legends, as her inflatable nemesis soared high over laughter and levity, rendering her solemnity the perfect evening snack for lighthearted humor. Sure enough, the rumbles of camaraderie and laughter eventually forced a surrender, and as the meeting came to an end, it was Karen herself, with curved lips turning towards a rueful smile, muttering, Okay, maybe inflatable cheer is perfect for the season." With that remark, I knew then and there that not only had our spirits festooned like a well-decorated tree, but we also sent an irrefutable message. A new heaven of humor could thrive in the face of tyranny. But the question lingered in my mind. Had our quirky standoff only just begun? Or could it be that Karen was finally ready to join us in our inflatable fun? The aftermath of the meeting rippled through our neighborhood like the gentle waves caused by a feather hitting the water surface. It was comical to think that for a brief moment, Karen's rigid demeanor had cracked, allowing festivity to seep through the gaps like joyous confetti. I swaggered around my house, feeling lighter than air, chuckles bubbling out of me whenever I thought about the absurdity of the evening. Danny was practically dancing down the sidewalk, parading his inflatable flamingo like it was a trophy. "Hey, Sam," he called out, already plotting our next caper. "How about we up the ante with a full-on inflatable family reunion next? You know, Aunt Karen represented by a life-sized balloon of herself." We both erupted in laughter, and it felt surreal that the threat of HOA reprisals had suddenly transformed into plans for whimsical festivities. Yet when morning rolled in, with Mrs. Thornton from 2 streets over baking pumpkin muffins, and the sun casting a golden glow over our neighborhood, a curious notion clouded my thrill. What if Karen launched her own counteroffensive? I mean, she had previously mentored the HOA like it was her own personal army, and even though her demeanor had softened momentarily, I wasn't ready to underestimate the powerful weight of her clipboard, nor the laser-focused glint in her eye that spoke of revenge. As I sipped my coffee, I cautiously glanced outside, scanning my yard for any rogue inflatables that hadn't blown away. To my surprise, it was then I saw it. A colossal 20-foot inflatable balloon of Karen herself, standing ominously in front of her home, poised like a sentry guarding the kingdom of what was becoming a holiday battlefield. Instinctively, I choked on my pumpkin spice latte, paint splattering over my cargo shorts, because what's a good plot twist without a caffeinated wardrobe malfunction? "Danny," I hollered, "get over here. You won't believe this." My heart raced as I pictured our lively evening of camaraderie morphing into a comical showdown, inflatable edition. "I knew she wouldn't take this lying down," he exclaimed, bursting into a fit of giggles. The sheer absurdity of Karen's drastic attempt to reclaim her position was laugh-inducing. We stared at the balloon, its lifelike details, complete with a scowl that somehow managed to be both intimidating and ridiculous, seemed to taunt us. "It's time for inflatable diplomacy, my friend," Danny pronounced with a playful seriousness that made me chuckle. With the morning sun glistening on our inflatable nemesis, I soon gathered a troop of neighbors, each bringing their best inflatable designs to defend our joyful invasion. Shall we name the balloon Karen or Karen Voss, the great deflating ruler? I quipped, and the group erupted, hatching plans to accumulate more inflatables than Kurt's Halloween decorations. Our collective energy morphed into an inflatable comet, soaring into action, with Danny updating our neighborhood group chat, "Team Inflatable versus Karen Balloon. May the best absurdity win." I felt like a general preparing for battle, ready to embrace whatever Karen threw in our direction with a smile. Bolstered by our buoyant camaraderie, We orchestrated an event around an inflatable festival day. The yard became an inflatable wonderland. Unicorns, flamingos, and even inflatable lawn gnomes appeared. On the day of the festival, I pranced around, encouraging a contest on who could make the best Karen complaining sound effects in front of our inflatable adversary. I donned a pair of oversized sunglasses, parading around the yard, pretending to be Karen herself. What in the world is happening here? Where is the order? Every teetering jest caused the neighbors to cringe with laughter, transforming my home into the bombastic headquarters of inflatable rebellion. However, I was extra cautious of the Karen balloon, which now stood even taller, as if it had a vendetta, the scowling face aimed down towards the ground like it was ready to let loose a storm of petty complaints. As night fell and twinkling lights enveloped our neighborhood like fairy dust, laughter erupted across the street, the joyous beacons of camaraderie blurring the lines of our prior hinders. We posed for group photos, arms thrown over each other's shoulders, all while nestled among our whimsical inflatable army. I imagined how that towering balloon, so reminiscent of our reluctant HOA queen, could sink or rise with the tides of our jubilation. But the visual satirization, as Karen herself remained a living, breathing entity a mere 5 yards away, created a scene even I couldn't ignore. Maybe Karen could savor the absurdity as well. After all, who didn't enjoy immense inflatable properties? Just as I believed this spectacle was to culminate with a triumph of absurd humor, Karen herself emerged from her fortress, clipboard in hand, and an expression that looked suspiciously like amusement. "All right, everybody, what's happening here?" she called out, a slight smile hiding behind her stern facade. "I came to enjoy my balloon," she gestured. And as if triggered by a charm, the sea of revelers erupted into applause. "Oh, so you're a fan of inflatable events now?" I shouted back cheekily, and she chuckled, the resistance crumbling as the icy demeanor dissolved into the gentle sweetness of holiday cheer. It hit me then. Perhaps the absurdity of our inflatable battle brought Karen closer to us than her meticulously outlined rules ever had. Night glimmered with sparkling lights around an unexpected friendship. The laughter rippled like a soft wave, granting a collective sigh of relief. As the warmth enveloped us, I raised my cup of cocoa, inviting them to indulge in the sheer joy of our confrontation. Here's to inflatable, squeaky toys and the true spirit of the season. And at that moment, I realized that amidst narrow alleys of laughter and balloon warfare, absurdity had triumphed not just against Karen, but over our own preconceptions. We discovered that sometimes the greatest gift you can give each other is simply to embrace laughter, loved ones, and a towering inflatable, even when it's the embodiment of your neighbor. It's a lesson worth celebrating every day, isn't it? My fingers fumbled with the last blow-up snowman, its smug little smile somehow mocking me. I had an elaborate setup planned, a veritable North Pole of inflatable whimsy, complete with a dancing Santa, twinkling lights, and enough holiday cheer to make even the most Scrooge-like neighbors crack a smirk. Just as I was stepping back to critique my work with the precision of a curator evaluating a masterpiece, there she was, Karen Voss, marching down the sidewalk like the world's most meticulous guard dog. Clipboard gripped tightly in one hand, pen poised like a sword, she resembled a general preparing to wage war. "Sam," she barked, frowning as if I had just announced I was planning to host a rave in my front yard. These decorations are in direct violation of HOA Rule 78B. All holiday displays must remain under 3 feet in height and adhere to monochromatic color schemes. It was as if she had delivered a death sentence to my inflatable winter wonderland. "Oh, sweet Karen," I replied with a dramatic flair, "I assure you that an inflatable snowman with a height of over 3 feet is not the cause of our neighborhood's declining property values." I sensed a mixture of disbelief and irritation in her eyes, like I had just suggested she take off her power blazer and dance in the rain. I wasn't worried, though. In my heart, I knew that the spirit of the holidays outweighed the pettiness of some arbitrary rule. With a slight smirk on my face, I finished setting up my display, my inflatable army bobbing cheerfully, despite Karen's laser-focused gaze, of disapproval. After all, who could resist the joy radiating from my overwhelming assemblage of cotton, air, and lightweight plastic? Later that day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I confided in Danny about my run-in with Karen. He half sipped his beer, then snorted with laughter. "You know what you need? A 20-foot inflatable Karen to really show her whose yard is boss." The idea struck me with comedic magnanimity. Here was the perfect opportunity to escalate this ridiculous feud. Didn't the universe conspire in delightful ways when you least expected it? "I'll make it life-size," I declared, fueled by audacity and some leftover eggnog. As we chuckled, I couldn't help but envision an inflatable Karen, complete with a clipboard, arms crossed, and that signature frown wielded like a badge of honor. The following weekend saw me diving deep into my DIY reservoir of creativity. I scoured local stores for inflatable supplies. The more absurd, the better. Luckily, after sorting through the aisles of bright colors and cheap materials, I was soon bogged down with a literal mountain of inflated revenge. I was piecing it all together meticulously in my garage, enlisting Danny as my trusty sidekick, armed with a hot glue gun and an uncanny talent for crafting visual puns. From the oversized bobblehead of Karen's bleach blonde bob to an impressively lifelike rendition of her blazer, the caricature started taking shape before my very eyes. As we worked, the laughter echoed through the garage, each snipped wire and glue-stained finger only reinforcing our sense of mischief. I could almost hear Karen's wrath boiling over at the thought of her balloon doppelganger, deflating her decorum. The grand reveal was set for the start of the holiday week, strategically timed for maximum visibility. I chose the 11th hour of a snow-laden evening where street lamps flickered like fireflies, illuminating my masterpiece in all its tacky glory. I stood back and admired the inflatable Karen, arms crossed and mouth agape, eyes glaring at the passing neighborhood like she was doing her job as some kind of inflatable HOA enforcer. She was a sight to behold, towering over my yard, the very essence of authority, now rendered as a bouncy spectacle. I could hardly contain my glee as I waited for the first curious neighbor to stumble upon my inflatable mockery. Would it be Karen, perhaps so incensed that she would pop the thing herself? Or maybe another unsuspecting neighbor who had just returned from holiday shopping, stuffing their trunk with bags of seasonal delights? As predicted, a quiet murmur broke through the crisp winter night. Soon, giggles and gasps erupted from passersby. It was music to my ears. Watching my neighbors gather, smartphone cameras drawn like weapons, I felt a swell of pride. They stood, captivated by the monument of revenge peering down at them, as if it were shouting, "Behold, not all who wield authority must be taken seriously." Then there she was, Karen herself, striding up with a furious glint in her eye, clipboard in hand like a sword, ready to slay my festive rebellion. I braced myself, giddy and dual, ready as she cast her sharp gaze over my inflatable creation. Did she realize how ridiculous she looked, staring at a balloon version of herself? The darkness aside, it was difficult to miss the irony washing over her features as she bared those unmistakable signs of boiling rage. Would she rally the troops or sulk home, demoralized by her own inflated ego? It was here, before the looming, inflatable likeness of her own strict persona, that Karen became a spectacle worthy of her own show. She opened her mouth, words hanging as though frozen in the icy air, face shifting through shades of disbelief and rage. This cannot be allowed," she sputtered, sputtering as if she were trying to turn the tides of the holiday season single-handedly. I felt a sense of triumph wash over me as I met her gaze with controlled defiance. "Oh, Karen," I grinned, "I think you'll find that fighting against joy is rather difficult, especially when it's 6 feet high and staring back at you." My explanation hung in the air, sparkly and whimsical, alongside the ornamental aesthetics of the holidays. That night, as holiday cheer, laughter, and colorful twinkling lights danced around our neighborhood, I buried the avarice of authority beneath layers of inflatable humor. The night stretched on with the absurdity of our petty feud morphing into a celebration. Who knew that rebellion could learn its way into the hearts of a community? Who knew armored inflatable judgment could incite such joy? As the tension in the air crackled like static electricity, I could see the collective smiles of my neighbors transforming into stifled giggles as Karen struggled to find her footing in this absurd situation. Her face shifted from shock to indignation, and with every passing second, it became painfully clear that the inflatable Karen had inadvertently summoned an avalanche of laughter directed at her expense. I swear I felt the air shimmer with glee as Danny leaned against a snow-laden tree, practically bubbling over with laughter at the spectacle. "I've seen rainstorms with less impact than what's happening right now," he howled, slapping his knee in gleeful disbelief. Who knew that the most challenging of committee members could become the neighborhood's favorite punchline? Karen's attempts to regain her composure fell flat, like a poorly inflated balloon at a rival birthday party. "This mockery isn't amusing," she asserted, her voice quaking as she waved the clipboard like an underwhelming sword. "This is a violation of HOA, of decency." The words rushed out of her mouth, fluttering around like the leaves caught in the light winter breeze. You could practically hear the gears grinding in her mind as she desperately sought a valid citation to exercise her power over our holiday infraction. But in that moment, I recognized a delightful truth. Her meticulous adherence to rules had become the least interesting aspect of this entire fiasco. Emboldened by the enthusiasm of my audience, eager neighbors gathering their camera phones, and some actually nodding as they cheered along, my insatiable need for mischief gained momentum. I couldn't resist throwing a few pithy remarks into the mix. "You know, Karen, I'd say this giant inflatable has a touch more charisma than you." As the laughter erupted, I savored the satisfaction of my delivery, knowing I had expertly shifted the balance of power in this inflatable duel. Each chuckle from my neighbors was like fuel on a blaze, and Karen, frustrated and furious, seemed utterly unprepared for this light-hearted mutiny sprouting up right under her perfectly coiffed bob. In the midst of the chaos, Karen's demeanor radically transformed. I truly believe she was trying to keep the flickers of laughter at bay like an offended cat trying to swat down a funky laser pointer. But as her efforts became more frantic, she unwittingly cemented the inflatable Karen's place as the star of the night. With every indignation she sought to voice, it became abundantly clear to me, and the entire street, that she was becoming the unwitting jester in this holiday tale. "You'll get your HOA compliance notice in the morning," she bellowed in a last resort, and I fell into a fit of laughter. "Oh, I'm counting on it," I replied, reveling in the sweet satisfaction that she was igniting my further plans for inflatable humor. As the evening unfolded under the soft glow of twinkling lights, the allure of community warming my heart, an unexpected camaraderie emerged. Neighbors began sharing their own tales of HOA run-ins, relishing the riotous dysfunction of authority where no decency existed towards creativity and fun. "I once got a warning for having 2 flamingos in my front yard," exclaimed Mrs. Patterson, a neighbor from 3 houses down, shaking her head in disbelief. "So what did I do? I bought a dozen." The laughter was infectious, and every news story formed a wave of solidarity against the thwarted attempts of oppressive regulation. In that moment, I couldn't help but envision the makeshift council of inflatable rebellion rising from the very depths of holiday cheer. Yet in the back of my mind, a delicious idea brewed with a hint of subversion. What if this inflatable facade wasn't just an act of resistance, but a way to harness our collective creativity? What if we transformed this rivalry into a neighborhood festival that would truly belong to all of us? I glanced at Danny, who was now carefully positioning my inflatable Karen to aim her piercing gaze directly at the now bemused Karen. A flicker of inspiration ignited within me, and I leaned closer to Danny, whispering conspiratorially, "What if we organize an HOA holiday show-off? Each house can decorate inclusively, using whatever they want. We'll even crown the best display." Danny's eyes gleamed with mischief as he bounced on his heels. "You couldn't have picked a better way to keep the spirit alive. We'll have our rules, Karen can't touch that." And just like that, a quiet revolution was born, one that spread through the excited murmur of our neighbors. "Let's make it official," I shouted over the gathering crowd, high on excitement and the thought of our upcoming escapade. In Karen's desire to restrict the fun, she had unwittingly unleashed something far more significant, a potential community celebration that could alter the very fabric of our neighborhood. The mere thought shot a thrill through me as I watched Karen's shoulders slump in helpless annoyance, realizing her grip on our joyous spirit was fraying faster than she could write up citations. In that light-hearted moment of collective rebellion, I knew we were all set to take back the holiday spirit, one inflatable grin at a time. As the cacophony of laughter echoed through the chilly evening air, I felt the entire neighborhood morph into a vibrant tapestry of creativity and defiance. Energized by Danny's infectious enthusiasm and the cheerful chatter of my neighbors, I pondered aloud, what if we collectively challenge the HOA's reign of terror with a decorate or die festival? The response was nothing short of a raucous cheer, like a battle cry against the stifling grip of the HOA. Each nod and excited murmur sparked more ideas. Flamingo flocks, Santa-infused snowmen, unicorns rampaging through Christmas lights. Every resident seemed to have a treasure trove of absurdities they longed to unleash against the tyranny of conformity. How had we let these frivolous rules stifle our festive cheer for so long? Danny, ever the instigator, leapt onto the rickety porch railing like it was his own personal stage. Ladies and gentlemen, gather round for the first ever HOA Holiday Battle Royale. His voice echoed in a theatrical flourish, and I couldn't help but join in. Bring your silliest decorations, your wildest ideas, and your best fighting spirit. We won't just decorate, we will dominate. Laughter erupted amidst the crowd, and a sense of unity began to blossom. It was empowering to see my neighbors drop their inhibitions and suddenly realize that collectively we could counterbalance the sternness of Karen with the joy of creative expression. Wouldn't it be grand to turn our streets into a kaleidoscope of personality and laughter instead of a dull barrier of black and white rules? As excitement crackled in the air like fireworks ready to burst, we dove headfirst into the planning. Out came makeshift signboards, brilliantly scrawled illustrations of inflatable warriors, alongside whimsical catchphrases like, "Inflate your spirit," and "Let your decorating run wild." The neighborhood buzzed with newfound camaraderie. Even Miss Patterson, known for her no-nonsense attitude, was enthusiastically decorating her garden with a bizarre assortment of lawn gnomes donning holiday hats. I chuckled at the thought of the HOA being forced to approve a flamingo holding a candy cane. The absurdity made my heart swell with glee. What a sight it would be, transforming our spaces into an animated canvas that vividly waved goodbye to the cloak of conformity. In the days that followed, it felt like our neighborhood was undergoing an artistic awakening. Christmas lights, inflatable creatures of all shapes and sizes, and outrageous decorations sprang up like wildflowers after a spring rain. I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride as I stood in my front yard, my own inflatable Karen now flanked by a jubilant parade of whimsical decorations, each a celebration in its own right. I took it upon myself to add with care. A 12-foot-tall snowman sporting sunglasses, a gang of reindeer performing synchronized flying, and even a disco ball dangling from the branches of our scraggly oak tree. From the corner of my eye, I could see Karen glaring from the confines of her vinyl fortress, her own front yard looking more drab by the second, like a parking lot after an amusement park closed down. The day of the festival arrived with unexpected hilarity. Locals bustled about, sharing festive treats and exchanging decorating secrets, as if we were all part of a grand heist in the name of cheer. Emphasizing solidarity, we walked up and down each street, showcasing a ridiculous array of inflatable mascots that would make even a cynical elf crack a smile. I could clearly overhear the grumbles from Karen as she stomped about, clipboard in tow. "This collective chaos is defiance," she spat at anyone who dared to glance her way. But she couldn't snuff out the infectious laughter that coursed through our community. I noticed the defiant looks neighbors shot her way, defiance that fueled my resolve to revel in our newfound freedom. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over our eclectic displays, the time had come for the judging. I had secretly dubbed myself the judge, anointing no one else brave enough to face Karen's wrath as I wrote down the names of all the top contenders. The grand prize, a trophy fashioned from a repurposed beach ball, and a comically oversized inflatable flamingo, of course, was set up front and center. We gathered to share stories, laugh, and revel in the audacity of it all. Who knew deflation could lead to such elevation of spirit? Danny quipped, laughing as he nudged the inflatable Karen, which had by now assumed the role of our mascot. As the judges announced the winners, the tropical flamingo family winning by a landslide, thunderous applause erupted, and Karen's face twisted in a blend of disbelief and simmering anger. In that glorious moment, I realized just how powerfully laughter can unite a community, and no HOA rule could ever extinguish our shared spirit. As we hoisted our beach ball trophy high, the absurdity of our triumph washed over me like a welcome tide. I turned just in time to catch Karen's reaction, her mouth agape, her clipboard dangling limply from her fingers as the inevitable reality washed over her. We had created something so joyous and vibrant that not even her uptight list of regulations could quash our spirit now. I felt vindicated, riding high on a wave of ridiculousness that not only held our neighborhood together, but also mocked the very fabric of restrictive authority. "Hey, Karen," I called cheekily, as my neighbors chanted an enthusiastic yes in agreement. "You know what? Someone has to remind the world that flapjacks and flamingos should be celebrated. Want to join the party?" My voice echoed across the street, an invitation not just for Karen, but an open doorway for anyone who might want to relish in unplanned amusement, the bewildering joy of our flamboyant festival of defiance. The following week rolled in with the inertia of a runaway train, my inflatable Karen silently presiding over the neighborhood festivities as a comical reminder of our collective crusade against Karen Voss's hoity-toity tirades. My yard felt like it was auditioning for a role in a holiday special, every inflatable competing for the title of most ridiculous decorative masterpiece. From an epic cyclops snowman sporting a single googly eye, a personal favorite, to a flamboyant paratrooper penguin swaying gently in the wind, it was a joyful parody of holiday cheer. Yet, through all the laughter, I couldn't ignore the small, simmering concern brewing in the back of my mind. How would Karen retaliate? After all, a puppet master with a penchant for control like her was bound to reach for her strings sooner or later. One afternoon, as I meticulously adjusted the positions of my inflatable menagerie, I was interrupted by Danny barging into my yard, an involuntary grin wrestling with confusion on his face. "Dude, you need to check this out." He gestured wildly, his hand gesticulating like one of those inflatable wacky tube men. With a cheeky anticipation, he led me around the block. When we rounded the corner, the sight struck me like a chestnut bomb blasting on December 25th. Karen had unleashed her own Halloween-themed horror in the form of a 20-foot inflatable Karen balloon, complete with an expression that could curdle milk. It loomed like a holiday yet to be defined, part mortifying, part masterful, and I couldn't help but burst into peals of laughter. She was taking on our playful spirit with an absurdity that was almost admirable. Had Karen been harboring this inflatable monstrosity all along, simply waiting for the right moment to pounce? What's next? A Hulk-sized inflatable of herself? I laughed, shaking my head in disbelief. With the balloon dominating the skies, her backyard now resembled an eerie carnival, as if she was inviting every HOA member north of 12 to witness an extravaganza instead of leading them into battle. Despite my chuckles, it was clear this would not end without a fabulous showdown. The balloon bobbed menacingly above the neighborhood, casting a long shadow over my yard, a reminder of her grim presence, and it fueled a fire of determination within me. As Danny and I concocted plans to match her extravagant display, I couldn't ignore that strange mix of dread and exhilaration brewing in my gut. The gauntlet had been thrown. As the weekend approached, the neighborhood buzzed with anticipation akin to schoolchildren before a holiday break. Every neighbor rallied behind my quirky mission to combat the inflatable behemoth, and in a flash, we turned the tide into a veritable arms race of inflatable hilarity. We gathered under the light of fairy lights and holiday decorations, brainstorming ingenious designs to stifle Karen's inflated ego. A conglomerate of unicorns, dancing flamingos dressed as Santa's helpers, And even a gigantic inflatable chicken wearing a Christmas hat took shape in our yards. The juxtaposition provided a perfect rebuttal to her domineering lawn, transforming my front yard into a mesmerizing battlefield of festive fun. My inflatable Karen now sported a mischievous grin, a slight smirk that seemed to indicate victory was upon us. The following night, as we readied our presentations in playful preparation for the follow-up HOA meeting, an unexpected twist piled on top of our suburban spectacle. Thank you, social media. Photos of our outlandish inflatable parade started to circulate, igniting a spark of curiosity beyond our neighborhood borders. News anchors chuckled at the Karen versus Karen rivalry, complete with close-up shots of my inflatable counterpart photoshopped into hilarious situations, staking claim on famous landmarks, invading event celebrations, you name it. And soon, it wasn't just a street battle anymore. It had garnered the attention of local influencers, each eager to show up and document our one-woman war against the strictures of conformity, morphing the turf into an unexpected spot for hilarious escapades and photo opportunities. That resonates with the rampant chaos of a beaming summer festival. And who knew that inflatable shenanigans could pull the community together so triumphantly? On the night of the big Zoom HOA meeting, a platform I intended to treat like my own personal stage, all the excitement came crashing back as Karen, inevitable as the sunrise, logged in wearing her signature blazer and armed with a small army of screenshots from the news coverage. But instead of stooping to the same condescending levels she had previously relied upon, I decided to switch tactics. With all of the absurd admiration from our multiple fans rallying behind us, I transformed the conversation. With a giant inflatable Karen looming in her yard, I began smirking. It's hard for anyone in the HOA to argue we've deflated the holiday spirit. A slew of backup grins bolstered my words as I pointed my camera at my display of inflatable craziness, reclaiming the narrative and reveling in the absurdity. While Karen sputtered in disbelief, I could see the crack in her armor. The neighborhood's rebellion had reached her, after all, and as I showcased our flip-tastic variety of whimsical creations, a quiet realization settled among the HOA members. There was beauty and bravery in our defiance of Karen's stifling rules. With laughter reverberating on every screen, our community united, fundamentally shaking the very foundation upon which the HOA dictated our lives. Yes, it was ostentatious. Yes, it was utterly ridiculous. But when in the world did expressing joy become a sin? And as laughter decisively rang through that Zoom meeting, I knew Karen's reign of terror was finally reaching its end. Did I just witness a foundation quake beneath her meticulously manicured grass, leading to the impending collapse of her prissy empire? Thanks for tuning in. It really means a lot to us. If you're still fired up from this HOA showdown, check out our next jaw-dropping battle on the right, or let YouTube surprise you with another wild ride on the left. Take your pick, and I'll see you in the next neighborhood drama.